You've said that a minister's presence in your cabinet indicates your confidence in them. David Lametti is no longer in cabinet. Why did you lose confidence in him?
David Lametti has been an extraordinary team member and will continue to be a great member of the Liberal team for many years to come.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is still not explaining why David Lametti is out of cabinet and a newcomer is in his place as Minister of Justice. That's Arif Virani being sworn in as Minister of Justice and Attorney General. His predecessor, Lametti, has said little about the move, but did call it a surprise. Virani inherits a high-pressure file with Conservatives and provincial leaders repeatedly calling for swift action on issues like bail reform. For more on this new promotion, we're joined by the new Justice Minister, Arif Virani. Minister, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Big promotion for you, but a big demotion for David Lametti. A surprise move. Have you spoken to Mr. Lametti at all since you've taken on this job? You were his parliamentary secretary for a while.
I was his parliamentary secretary for a number of years, and I've got tremendous respect for David. He did incredible work as the Justice Minister and as a parliamentarian, and we've been exchanging some messages, and I will be speaking to him very shortly.
Were you surprised when the Prime Minister asked you to take on the Justice portfolio as your very first cabinet post?
I was pleasantly surprised. Let's just say that I think there's probably not a lot of lawyers in the country that don't sort of dream of sort of lofty things such as being the Attorney General of Canada. So when I was asked, I was absolutely delighted and enthusiastic and very, very pleased. But I think it's a significant one. But I think I would have been more surprised had I not had 3.5 years under two different Justice Ministers as Parliamentary Secretary. So it's definitely a building, a file, a dossier that I feel comfortable with. And as I've been getting briefed up, a lot of the staff have remained over the years, so there's familiar faces and a lot of familiar issues.
A lot of familiar issues. One of your immediate challenges is going to be on bail reform, something that the Conservatives have been hammering your government about and will now be hammering you about when Parliament comes back in the fall. The House rose before passing the changes to bail reform there. Did your government let down Canadians by not getting that done before the summer break?
I don't think so. I think the government and the Canadians need to know that this is a fundamental priority for me. One of the first things I inquired about is what justice bills are pending right now. C-48 is one of them. That's something that I'm going to focus on as a top priority the second the House convenes in September. I think what Canadians need to know is that in a minority parliament, it requires more than one party to pass a bill. The official opposition can cooperate with us if they share this pressing priority for bail reform. They can help us get that across the finish line. Unfortunately, there were some tactics, some obstruction in May and June in the House of Commons that prevented second reading debate for even getting going in earnest on this bill. That's something that we don't want to see. I think it's in everyone's interest, including the opposition's, as well as all Canadians' interest, to see this passed and off to the Senate as fast as possible.
But the government was able to get a bunch of legislation through. You've got a confidence and supply partner with the NDP. So I just wonder what message does it send that you weren't able to get this one done when so many people, from police forces to premiers, have been pushing for it?
I think the message to police forces and premiers is that the unanimity that we had in terms of the consultations that we had on the bill, the fact that we gathered different stakeholders in the justice system, the fact that the premiers were on board, the chiefs of police, we had other legal stakeholders involved. Everyone spoke with one voice and was uniform that dangerous violent offenders, people that are using weapons, need to be treated differently in terms of bail reform. That's important. We've heard them at the time we were developing the bill. We hear them now. I hear them, and what we're going to be doing, what I will be doing, is prioritizing the passage of this bill through the Commons as fast as possible this fall.
You're a Toronto MP, and so you know full well all of the issues around public safety, shootings, stabbings, violent incidents on transit. A lot of people saying this is linked to the bail system. Wholesale change in justice, public safety. Is that an admission by your government or an admission by the Prime Minister, really, that the government hasn't performed on those key issues as well as Canadians would like?
I think the cabinet shuffle is obviously at the purview of the Prime Minister. I think what you're seeing with this cabinet is fresh perspectives and some fresh faces, other people changing portfolios. But as a Toronto MP, I also appreciate that some of the criminality and some of the violence that we're seeing is informed by multiple different perspectives. We can talk about housing, we can talk about mental health and addictions, we can talk about criminal justice reform. I think looking at that in only one silo, just with the criminal justice lens, would be inaccurate and inappropriate and not provide the service we need to Torontonians and to other Canadians. So we're looking at it from a multifaceted perspective. My part as AG and Minister of Justice is to take care of the criminal justice reform, and that's what I'm dedicated to do.
But you mentioned housing, you mentioned mental health, and you mentioned justice. All of those changed. You know, when things are going well in those areas in dealing with fundamental issues of public safety like this, you don't necessarily shake those things up, but the Prime Minister felt a need to do it. How do you think Canadians should view the fact that those core priorities that are all dealing with these underlying circumstances to the violence we're seeing were all changed?
I think people should read in the fact that we've got a strong team, we've got a lot of depth. The Prime Minister wanted some new faces in some certain roles. Other faces, as I said, had shifted. But I think if you're taking a macro perspective on the cabinet shuffle, you can also look at the faces that didn't move. Chrystia Freeland remains the Finance Minister, key person in terms of having her hands on the purse strings in terms of what we're doing on basic affordability measures, for example. François-Philippe Champagne remained in the role of Industry Minister at ISED, really critical in terms of attracting investment into the country. I think what Canadians are looking for is a government that keeps Canadians safe, but also is attuned to their challenges in terms of cost of living, affordability, and also job creation. And a lot of those key portfolios remained intact. I think having some fresh perspectives like mine with respect to criminal justice reform is useful, and also renewed vigor and enthusiasm in terms of getting things done expeditiously.
Getting things done expeditiously, one of the challenges in your department has been a slow pace of judicial appointments, to the point where the Supreme Court Justice Richard Wagner warned the Prime Minister of the consequences of these continued vacancies. Both offices play a role, yours and the PMO. How do you get them aligned and fix this challenge?
I think you get them aligned and fix the sort of the pace at which appointments need to be made by ensuring that people are speaking with one another, people aren't working in silos. I literally had you asked me about briefings that I've had. One of the first briefings I had was about judicial appointments and where we are. Obviously, my office overlooks the Supreme Court of Canada. As a constitutional lawyer who spent time litigating at various courts around the country, the importance of the Supreme Court of Canada goes without saying. It's critical to fill that vacancy and fill it quickly.
But it's everywhere at all levels of the judiciary, right? It's not just the Supreme Court that the Chief Justice is warning about as trial lawyers. It's Superior Court judges that you may appoint, that it's just happening too slowly.
Yes, and I think the point is well taken in terms of there are vacancies at different levels. Obviously, the Supreme Court one stands out.
Sure.
But what I would say is that we've done a large number of appointments thus far. There are others in the pipeline. What we need to do is be attracting applicants. We need to be vetting them quickly. We need to ensure that what are called the judicial appointments committees are fully staffed and functional, and we need to be expediting our review of those applications. All the while, we're seeking both qualified applicants, but also people that bring a breadth of diversity and experience in terms of lived experience to that role. I think diversifying the bench is a critical thing that we need to be doing more of, so that that bench represents the candidate that it serves.
Has the vetting and the staffing of the appointments, has that not been happening up until now? You mentioned working in silos. Has Justice and PMO been working in a silo to this point that has caused this slow pace of appointments?
I think Justice and PMO are never working in silos. We're always working in hand. But I think what's important is that as a new minister, I'm going to just dedicate myself to making sure the lines of communication are clear. People are tasked with what they need to do and doing it efficiently and effectively, so that we can address these issues quickly, preempting any potential hurdles or obstacles from arising, but also ensuring that we're doing the work quickly to meet the needs of the court. I think it's important in terms of the broad scale picture. I think Canadians that are watching, what they want to know is that we're concerned about their safety, we're concerned about their access to judicial remedies. That means having properly staffed courts, including with judges of the highest caliber that represent that diversity. That's something I'm dedicated to. I worked on that as Parliamentary Secretary. As a Ugandan Muslim refugee, a South Asian male occupying this lofty post, I'm doubling down on that in terms of what the work that I will do in terms of ensuring a diverse, highly qualified bench that is delivered for Canadians and delivered quickly for Canadians.
One of the other issues you'll be in charge of is extradition. And there's a parliamentary committee that has made recommendations for significant changes to the extradition system here in Canada. And today, Hassan Diab, whose case as an Ottawa academic who was extradited to France and spent time in jail, was sent home because the case fell apart and has now been convicted in absentia. They delivered a petition to the Prime Minister's office urging you and the Prime Minister to not extradite him should France request it, and to reform the extradition system. Would you consider an extradition request from France for Hassan Diab, and do you think the extradition system needs changes?
Okay, so I'll take that sort of piecemeal. So in terms of the committee, the Justice Committee, and it's a review of the Parliamentary Committee, and its review of sort of the Extradition Act and the requested changes that are being called for. There's a 120-day requirement under the standing orders to respond to that. That response will be forthcoming around September or October of this year. So I will be looking at that and getting briefed on that file, so I'm not going to comment on that. With respect to the extradition request itself, I mean, David, I think you know I can't comment on that directly, and there's a good reason why I can't. The way an extradition process occurs is that there's a request from a foreign state. It goes to the Department of Justice. They work up the file. If it then proceeds out of the Department of Justice, it goes to a court of law. The court makes a decision on the extradition, and then it comes to the desk of the Minister of Justice for a final determination. I can't be seen to be influencing or predetermining any step in that process. Therefore, I cannot comment on Mr. Diab's case.
But as a matter of fairness, we've extradited him as a country once. He spent 3 years in a French prison. The case fell apart. He was sent home. Would it be fair to him as a human being to send him a second time?
So again, I cannot comment on that for the reasons I've articulated. It wouldn't be fair to Mr. Diab. It wouldn't be fair to the process that's been outlined.
Okay. Just as a final point, what would be the number one thing you hope to do in your term as Minister of Justice? We talked about bail reform. We talked about the judicial shortage. What's your priority for the department?
My priority is ensuring the safety of Canadians, and what that means in terms of sort of criminal justice reform, in terms of ensuring that the bail reform bill gets passed as quickly as possible. But my broad-scale priority has always been, as a person who decided to become a lawyer because of a passionate belief in equality, combating discrimination and fundamental human rights, is ensuring that we have a justice system that renders fairness, that is one that is appreciably and demonstrably diverse for Canadians, and one that promotes access to justice at multiple levels. One of the guiding things that I did as a young lawyer is I helped to create a legal clinic in Toronto that promotes access to justice for low-income South Asians in Toronto. I'm very, very proud of that, but as Minister of Justice, I feel like there's a lot more work that can be done with respect to those kinds of issues. And I'm dedicated to doing that, to serving the constituents who elected me and all Canadians.